Welcome to Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, the podcast that deals with all things mental health. We talk to professionals, survivors, and loved ones about their sometimes informative, sometimes uplifting, and sometimes tragic stories. I'm your host of the show, Todd Rennebaum, advocate, recovering addict, experienced sufferer of depression and anxiety, and author of the children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. I am Todd Rennebaum. This episode I am talking to a couple gentlemen, Shayne Cockerill and Dylan Eckes. They're the founding members of the Inner Man Project, a really great men's mental health group that they started, not that long ago, only in October, and it's really taken off, and they've really helped a lot of people out, and it sounds like they got a ton of members and just a ton of support. They also have a podcast called The Inner Man Show. Obviously, they talk about mental health and men's health. They were very kind and had me on as a guest back in November. So if you want to hear me be a guest and not a host, then I suggest you go to their podcast. And if you just like more mental health stuff, check out their podcast. Anyway, they're going to tell their story and how they started and, all types of nice stuff. So, without further ado, I give you Shayne Cockerill and Dylan Eckes. Okay, I guess my first question for you guys is, how did Inner Man Project come about? Or is that what it's called, the Inner Man Project?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess the reason why I decided to reach out to Dylan was a string of suicides that happened in Medicine Hat here, and they were very close in succession of when they happened. I've lost some personal friends of mine, family of mine. I work in a job where mental health is running rampant. I work with kids that mental health is running rampant. In our small community, our resources are very limited for men specifically, which coincidentally is all the suicides that happen in town here during that time were all men. So when I was sitting in one of my courses for work, I was scrolling through Facebook, which was probably not the greatest thing, wasn't paying attention too much, but I came across Dylan, a friend from high school that I've known for quite some time, and I've always known him to be a mental health advocate for throughout the years post high school. So I took a shot, thought I would reach out to Dylan, see what we could maybe do for a plan, and we met up for coffee, and we formulated some sort of small plan, got a few guys together, presented them basically what we wanted to do, which coincidentally was basically how you would see an AA circle or a veteran circle, something like that. We would sit down together, talk about our problems, our issues in a safe, non-judgmental space, and basically just be that gap between professional appointments because the wait times are so long. So that was the reason why I started, but Dylan already had the ball rolling before I reached out to him. It was almost like a bing bang boom kind of scenario, but I'll let Dylan kind of fill in the rest here.
Yeah, I've been a mental health advocate since 2016. I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder, depression, and anxiety in 2016. So I've already been in, I guess you could say, the advocacy space in regards to social media. I've had talks at the Medicine Hat College, or I've done talks at the Medicine Hat College. I used to work for several insurance companies. I used to do mental health talks for them as well, little presentations. And so anyways, this last summer, like Shayne had touched on, there was a string of suicides in Medicine Hat that rocked our city. And I'm an entrepreneur by heart. And I was just sitting. I had my journal in front of me. I had my phone in front of me, and I was just sitting there thinking and, tapping my pen. And my wife looks at me. She's like, "I know the gears are turning. What are you doing?" And I showed her my phone, and the phone was just my Adobe app. I was just playing around on like Photoshop or something. And I said, "What do you think about this?" And it said the Inner Man Project. And she's like, what is it? I was like, "I don't know yet." And this sounds like a storybook, but I looked down on my phone and Shayne had messaged me that day. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I got to get back to him." And in that moment, I opened my phone and he said, "Hey, basically we got to get together. I'd love to talk to you about this situation." And the next Thursday, yeah, we went and sat down, had a cup of coffee. I think that was the end of August. And then the following Thursday, right before September long, actually, we had a meeting at my office in our boardroom for, I would say, we started the Facebook group and we invited like 25 guys, and we just hoped a couple of them would show up. And lo and behold, 8 guys showed up, and that's how it started. So,
so it's really just been since this fall.
Yeah, the Inner Man Project Foundation, like the actual nonprofit organization, we got fully licensed at the beginning of October. The Facebook group started back in, I think it was August 29th.
Yeah.
And this group is now, it's bigger than just Medicine Hat. Like, are there people all over the province and all over the country joining? Is that okay if people do? Like the social media part, I guess.
Yeah, so for our men's only private forum, we are actually international. So we've had guys, we've heard from guys from like Spain, Portugal, New Zealand, Ireland. Like we're all over the place, and there's no restrictions. You don't have to be a part of our community to join it. It's basically what we do in person is we do peer-to-peer sessions. We sit down with men, like I mentioned before. But this is more of the social media aspect, and this includes basically anyone who is struggling. So we have roughly 1,800 men in our group right now, and
wow.
When we started this thing, we started off with about 40 or 50 guys the first week. The next week it was 100. The next week it was 300. The next week it was 500. And then it just exploded, and it was insane, and we didn't know how to keep up. But it turns out that we have about 300 or 400 guys that constantly post, but we have testimonies from many men recently just reaching out and be like, "Hey, all of your stories that I've been reading over the last few months have really been helping me, and really appreciate." And then they'll share their story, and that's essentially what it is the power of storytelling.
Right. So what are some of the positives or success stories that have come out of this? Has anyone said that this group has saved my life, or I was gonna run away or leave my wife or anything like that, and they ended up kind of getting their shit together because of Inner Man Project?
That's been, I think, the most for me on a personal level. Like that's the most. It's almost ridiculous for me, because I never thought in my lifetime I would hear testimonies from people, and men specifically, who are saying those things. "You saved my life. If it wasn't for you and the group, I wouldn't be here today." We've had men show up to our peer sessions who handed us suicide notes and said they didn't need this anymore. You name it, we've had it. It's a very surreal feeling, because even to this day, when men come up to Shayne and I, Shayne has actually a really cool story about just going to 7-Eleven one night. And personally, like today, I went and saw a friend of mine in Calgary, and he's going to link me up with his business coach, a mentor coach, because he deals in the youth realm on a mentorship level. I have no idea who this gentleman is, but he's heard us through social media. So when you hear things like that, and you see the positive impact that this group has created, I'm more proud of the guys who are in the group, who have spoken up, gentlemen like yourself, Todd, who have, taken the initiative to tell their stories and, and be vocal in public and not be afraid and spread the awareness. So I'll let Shayne tell this story because this is actually a pretty powerful story. So.
Sure.
Yeah, so we were about 3 or 4 months into the Interman project, into our Facebook forum and our peer sessions and everything like that. And I was sitting in 7-Eleven and I seen this guy's head in his hands, and he looked like he was struggling. And normally you don't walk up to someone's vehicle and try to converse with someone that looks like they're upset. But for some reason, he was sitting on his phone, but he was visibly upset. And I took a look. I walked by his car on my way into the 7-Eleven, and he was sitting on his phone and he was scrolling through the Interman project on our Facebook forum, and he was typing something out. And I don't have, again, this could have went very badly for me, and I don't think it was the smartest idea, but I decided to knock on his window. And he gave me a very shocked look, and he rolls it down a crack, and I'm like, "Hey, man, everything okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And I was like, "I noticed that you're on the Interman Project Facebook forum. Like, that's why I asked." And he's like, "Well, how do you know what this is?" And I was like, "Well, I was one of the founders of the Interman Project, and basically he started welling up, and I almost started welling up because I was like, this is insane." And he said, "You have no idea how you changed my life just by introducing all of these men together just to talk about their stories." And basically he said that we need to continue doing this. We need to grow. We need to make this more aware for everyone out there. And just this, stop in at the 7-Eleven just to grab a whatever it was, turned into one of the most, I guess, one of the better feeling days I've had in my life, to be honest, because that moment was that switch where I said, "Oh, we're really, really making a difference here." That was the first incident where I actually ran into it outside of the people that actually come to our programs.
Yeah, that's powerful. Well, good on you guys. So where's the peer group location? Like, do you have a physical location that you guys regularly meet?
Yeah, we actually we got the keys to our community center in November, and we officially opened for the public on January 1st. And it's been a fantastic experience. On an average week, we have anywhere from 30 to 60 people come through our doors, which is just, it's like I said, it's still a very humbling experience. So we had the community center launched. We also launched the First Responders Night, which is a peer group. So that's every Wednesday. Every Thursday right now is the Compassion Project, which is the female equivalent of the Interman Project. Melissa, my wife, is running that with two other wonderful women in Medicine Hat. And then, of course, every Sunday we have the Unmasked Masculinity peer-to-peer group session for men. And we actually just recently, on April 6th, launched the first out of town peer group. So every Tuesday at 7 p.m. in Calgary at the Scarborough United Church, they've been nice enough to volunteer their space for us. So, it's just been an absolutely phenomenal ride so far. And we're really hoping that we can get the ball rolling for Edmonton as well here in May.
Holy shit. I mean, considering you just started really in October, it's obviously needed in Alberta if a few months and it's taken off like this. That's amazing. What's the mental health and addiction system like in Alberta? Because we just had a provincial budget released a couple days ago, and it's always bleak.
From a personal experience, I can say that I had a very good company I worked with. And they were able to line me up with a psychiatrist, or actually a psychologist and a social worker when I needed it. But it's pretty basic for me personally. Just went to a family doctor, got lined up with a psychiatrist a few months later. But I know it's a little bit difficult little bit more difficult of a system for a lot of people. So I'll let Shayne take the reins on that because he actually deals in community resources. So.
Yeah, so in the larger cities like Calgary and Edmonton, it's and Dylan can actually attest to this because when he went and got help, it was out in Calgary and he was in within weeks. However, in our small community of Medicine Hat, and basically this is mirrored almost everywhere in Alberta, as far as I understand, is the resources are very limited and people can be waiting up to 8, 10, 12, 16 months just to get in to see a psychiatrist. I have a personal friend who's been he's waited 6 months, and then when the time came they actually canceled on him. So
Oh my God.
yeah, it was that was a really gut punch to him, and he was really looking forward to it. And you can understand why a lot of these guys are turned off from that when that crap starts to come out, right? So it's in the bigger cities, I think they have it figured out for the most part, but we're in the smaller communities, we need a lot more work. There are some free resources, but they're very I guess rudimentary, you would call it, and basically linear. And they're thinking of like, hey, we're going to be a band-aid for you until we can really get you in and do some work with you.
Right. Yeah, that's very similar to Saskatchewan right now. And we have a consumption site in Saskatoon that's just struggling to stay open, like a safe consumption site, and it's all publicly and funded. And they really thought they were going to get money from the province this year, and they got $0. And from what I understand, the Alberta government is kind of the same way with their consumption sites and some of their mental health practices and stuff. So, yeah, it's a rough go for mental health in the prairies right now.
It really is. And so there's a couple things that I'll touch on here. What we've noticed with the Interman Project is the organizations like the Interman Project. There's another couple other organizations in the Medicine Hat and surrounding area. The grant money is there. So they have this budget that's basically like, hey, if you guys on a community level can figure it out, we'll give you the money. So it's basically like all these organizations are on pilot projects all year long.
Right.
So that's number one. Number two is, here in Alberta, we tried the safe consumption site. And I know in Lethbridge in particular, they had very unsuccessful results with it. And a big reason is because when you think of a safe consumption site, and Todd, you can actually, touch on the subject a little bit too, but you want to be able to put these people literally in a safe position. If people are going to be using, you want them to be using in a legitimately safe environment, not in an industrial area where it takes, 2 bus rides or a 45-minute drive to get out to the area, and there's no healthcare individuals involved. There's no EMS on standby. It's just, it was such a rudimentary approach that it was never going to succeed. And here's the thing, it's such a controversial subject, and I don't understand why, because if you put a safe consumption site near a hospital, it's going to succeed. But our government doesn't think of that, right? And so now what they're doing is they're doing community housing. So I agree with that. From people who are struggling with mental illness and who are homeless, that's a fantastic approach. They're buying up a whole bunch of old motels and turning them into community shelters. Well, that's great, but it also doesn't solve the addictions issue. So I think what we're faced with is, you get these different parties politically with different ideologies. They want the same result, but nobody can seem to string enough years together to, figure it out. And so, especially in Alberta, we have a great community program in place where we don't have any homeless people because we've put together a program where everybody has a place to go. So in Medicine Hat, we technically have no homeless people. Now, people obviously will make that decision, but they at least have somewhere where they can go. In the bigger cities, it almost seems impossible. If you drive downtown Calgary right now, it is it's you almost feel hopeless because it's just, and you feel sorry for these people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. The nice thing about the Saskatoon safe consumption site, it's right in the neighborhood that has the most overdoses and whatnot, and it's a huge success. It really is. But what are some of the unique problems that you're finding that men have that they have trouble talking about around women, or like, I guess, just what are some of the unique problems that men have in general, I guess, that you find they're talking a lot about through the Inner Man Project?
Well, the biggest thing that we've noticed that men are really struggling with right now is COVID. A lot of people are jobless right now and scraping to make ends meet, and everyone's kind of locked in with their families, and sometimes it's going really well for some people, and sometimes it's not so good. And we get a lot of marital and relationship problems come through, as well as a lot of people are starting to turn to using substances and stuff like that as well. So it's sad when you hear a guy that's been sober for a year or two and on that road to recovery, and then all of a sudden they're relapsing because they're basically stuck with where they're at in their home, and that's basically what they turn to. So
Right.
And to kind of touch on what the unique circumstances of why men can't talk in the same room as women is mostly just the stigma.
Right.
The stigma that men need to be strong, they need to be tough, and it goes both ways. Some women think this, and most men think this. So we're kind of stuck between. That's our end goal, is to diminish that stigma and move forward where it is possible, where the men can talk to their women in their life and open up and be vulnerable, and we can understand each other. But there is also that scenario where men are very different from women at the same time too. So some stuff women can't understand, the same reason why men can't understand what some women go through. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
when we have each other to lean on, and even in Melissa's peer sessions, it's the same thing for her, is more women understand so they can provide the advice that they need, aside from what men can provide at some scenarios, right?
Right. I know for myself, a lot of the stuff that maybe women don't understand is I put pressure on myself, and I'm sure women put pressure on themselves too, but for different reasons. But it's like, I have to be a good provider for my family. I have to be the breadwinner and all this kind of stuff. And when I do have moments where I'm off of work for anxiety or depression and stuff, then it even makes it worse, because I beat myself up that I should be able to be providing for my family on top of the depression. So there's definitely unique problems men have, and that Inner Man Project is really amazing that people can come out and talk about this stuff. I notice on your website feed or on your Facebook feed, there's a lot of relationship stuff. A lot of men are talking about their children or their ex-wives or financial stuff with their exes and stuff. So it's nice to have a safe spot for them to open up and talk about this stuff.
Yeah, there's a couple things that I'll touch on there, Todd.
Sure.
The first one is, you mentioned, as a man, you put that extra pressure on yourself. What I've noticed personally in my peer groups, because Shayne runs the first responders, I run the Sundays, is the men who are coming into my Sunday groups, they're talking about, these are men between the ages of 27 and 35, talking about purpose. And one of the core values of the Inner Man Project Foundation is purpose. We want empathy, communication, and purpose. When it comes to the stigma of having mental illness, or just struggling with mental health, I think the biggest thing it comes down to is communication. And I think the hardest part about having a mental illness or dealing with your mental health is communicating how exactly you're feeling, and communicating exactly what you need, right? And having a spouse who has an open mindset, that's a big one. I hear it every Sunday about somebody who's frustrated because their significant other or a family member or their best friend, they just don't get it. And it's I see so much benefit from the peer groups in that regard. But I also see the residual effects and the side effects when these men are leaving the peer groups and they're coming back 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks later, and all of a sudden their confidence is better. They're walking with their chest up. They're speaking more clearly, and then you start talking to them and conversing with them, and they've had the best 5 weeks of their life. When you see these men change within 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, you start understanding the benefits of them connecting with other men, because 9 times out of 10, it's not just the peer groups or the private forum. It's them creating relationships outside those walls and outside that Facebook group with the other men. They're going for coffee. They're going for motorcycle rides together. They're walking the dogs together. And then all of a sudden you start building this camaraderie with somebody you never met before in your life, just because you had 2 or 3 things in common.
Right.
That has been the biggest takeaway. I think, we've had men move cities just to get closer to Medicine Hat, to be a part of the peer groups. It's wild. It's just, yeah.
Yes, it does sound very much like an AA group. The nice thing about AA, I don't know if you guys kind of have rules or anything about the meetings. Like in AA, you're not allowed to talk about outside issues, no politics, none of this, yada, yada, yada. So that it's all focused on just the matters at hand kind of thing. It's actually called the 12 Traditions. They're really great. Because I live in a small town, and there's people at the AA meeting that I've known for years. I've never associated with, because I didn't have that much in common. But then you get closer to them because of AA, and you really only talk about the stuff that you have in common, and you just strip away all that other crap, the outside stuff, the politics and all that stuff. So anyway, that's great that that's happening. That was one of my questions, actually. Do you think there's friendships and relationships blossoming from the Interman Project meetings? So that's good. Sorry, I got another question. What do you guys talk about your podcast? Because you also have a podcast you guys do.
Yeah, so our podcast, basically our realm of things is the personal development of people. So now that we have the attention of our men, and we're starting to kind of build those relationships and normalize speaking out about your feelings and struggles and stuff like that. Well, that's great talking about them and getting it out, and now it's not weighing on you as much. But then what the fuck do we do? You know what I mean? Are we allowed to swear on this? Sorry.
Fuck yeah.
Okay, good. But then what do we do, right? Is then we're just kind of walking ourselves in a circle. We feel better, yeah, but we're still stuck in that same place. So Dylan and I kind of we band together because we have 2 different ways that we have built, I guess, our lives in separate ways that kind of come together, and we kind of are the yin and the yang that works well. So basically what we want to do is, okay, now that we have a problem, we're going to teach you the skills, the not just like the actual physical skill, the emotional skill, and how to deal with hard situations in your life, and how to push through and work hard and make changes in your life that's going to be positive, and how you can really upgrade your life, essentially, is what we're looking at.
Through the podcast.
That's right.
So what kind of guests have you had on so far? Well, there's me.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, we've had several, I guess. I use the word genre, but so we've had gentlemen like yourself. One of our members, Brandon Hodel, he has a mental health story, battling depression and anxiety. We've had every single guest that we try to have on has some sort of story or adversity they faced with their mental health, and either they've became successful, something positive has happened to them in regards to their mental illness or mental health. We see that as being important, because what Shayne just said, we want to mix with the power of storytelling, number one, and number two is we see so much benefit for guys who realize that it is okay to be in the deep end. It is okay to sit in the shit for a while, because you can overcome that adversity. So when we have guests on, we talk about their story and how they overcame their adversities. And you know, like a gentleman like yourself who went through what they went through and then wrote a book about it. That's for me, that is showing other men how you can overcome adversity.
Do you find it difficult to find men willing to talk on your podcast?
Yes. You know, we've, as a podcast host, the one thing I can say is we try to find people outside our community, because we don't like stepping on toes, right? And with a small town, you're going to have people who step on each other's toes. So that was the first thing we decided on. We were going to have people from other walks of life and other communities come on to our show, and anybody that was local was friends of ours. So you know, we wanted to make that very clear. But I think, you know, the biggest thing that we look for in a guest and what we take away is we just want them to understand that it's about mental health and overcoming the struggles, right? So
I'm finding, having this podcast, that I'm finding it difficult to find men willing to talk about depression and anxiety and other illnesses, except for addiction. I find a lot of people that are in recovery with addiction, they love talking about it, which is great. But I'm really looking for people to talk about other mental illnesses like borderline personality, PTSD and stuff. And I'm having trouble finding guys that are willing to talk on air, quote unquote, about it. So I was curious about you guys.
yeah, the stigma's still there, right? And the thing that we're trying to, well, I guess now the both of us, because you have a podcast as well, is we're trying to bring that wall down. You know, I know Shayne he's suffered with his mental health. He's never been diagnosed, but he's suffered with his mental health and his mental health journey. I have been diagnosed myself and I've suffered from it. Once you come to grips and start telling your story and you start relating to other people, I think that's when the door busts wide open. But the problem is opening those initial doors, is seeing a light at the end of the tunnel and saying, hey, I can talk about this because it's actually not that bad. And many other men, many other people go through what I'm going through. So,
yeah, it's like growth is uncomfortable, and it's really uncomfortable talking about this shit the first time. But also practice makes perfect. And the more you talk about it, the easier it is. Well, actually, I say that, but then I was going through shit this winter and I didn't say crap to my wife until I was like, that's part of the disease, I guess, or part of the illness is like, one of the symptoms is shut up, don't say anything.
Yeah, well, and I think we would be major hypocrites if we weren't willing to talk about a little bit of our journey. So maybe if Dylan feels comfortable himself, then maybe he can share a little bit about his stuff, which, I mean, he's an open book for the most part, so I don't think he'll have a problem with it. But it was just most recently with me when I was sitting in a Calgary peer session on Tuesday there recently, that I realized that I'm actually struggling a lot more than I thought I was. I had a police officer and two correctional officers in front of me that I kind of seen an opportunity where I thought I would open up about my stuff while working at the jail, and basically try to get some insight in how they deal with their struggles and stuff, because obviously, you know, it's really a struggle for me and a struggle for my friends to try to relate to me when I'm talking about stuff. They have no idea what I've seen, what I've done, and what I've been through in terms of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I've seen, you know, people take their lives. I've seen people attempt to take their lives. I've had shit thrown at me. I've had, you know, people spit at me that's had AIDS. I've been through the ringer, you know, verbal abuse fucking constantly. That just comes with the territory, right? But you don't realize when you're there that shit really fucks with you. And then when you actually hear on this Tuesday, when these three men were really opening up about their jobs and like going through the traumas that they went through, it kind of reopened those scars. And it was like, hey, Dick, I had time to deal with this too because I was asking questions and they were trying to help me, but I wasn't getting what I needed out of them. So I was just telling Dylan recently that I'm probably going to have to go get checked in for PTSD, and I think that's going to be something that will probably help me going forward. So this is the first time I've ever talked about this, other than to Dylan and a good friend of mine. So now it's out in the ether, and I just want to say, like, if I like, and it wasn't hard for me because it was just realizing it, I think, was the biggest thing for me. I always thought I was pretty had it together, but those scars that were reopened really hit home, and it's something I don't want to deal with when I'm old. So now's the time, and I want people listening to, if that hasn't shared the story to anyone before or anything like that. This wasn't hard for me, but I also have a very strong support circle around me, and what kind of mental health advocate would I be if if I'm going to be a total hypocrite? So, um, if you have any friends, family, or anything out there that you're willing or they're willing to reach out, and if not, come to the Inner Man Project. We'll listen to you too. It's time to start opening up about this stuff because the shit weighs on you.
It does. I have a 16-year-old son, and it's like pulling teeth to get him to talk about anything. And the other day, I could tell something was wrong, and it took a good hour for me to convince him to actually say something. And within 5 minutes of talking, he just looked at me and said, I'm feeling a lot better already. I'm like, yeah, that's how it works. For me this winter, I was actually, like, I don't want to worry anybody that's listening, but I was having suicidal thoughts again. And for someone like me, it's kind of a fairly normal thing. At the same time, I knew, okay, I should maybe start talking to someone again. And I hadn't told my wife. And one of the reasons I haven't talked to my wife about it or told anybody about it was because I was worried they were going to get too worried. You know what I mean? It's like, because I have attempted suicide in the past, I was like, oh God, they're going to call the hospital. There's going to be an ambulance here. I'm going to be and it's like, no, like, don't, I was scared of that. Whereas, like, it's very common for me to have suicidal thoughts. And that's something that people that don't have suicidal thoughts don't understand. So I'm worried to freak people out in a lot of ways. So I don't say anything, and then it builds up to the point that's like, oh God, these are going from thoughts to maybe more. It's at that point where it's like, I start to get sick of feeling this way, and that option is always in the back of my head. That's when I was like, why do I know this shit, I advocate this shit when I'm not unhealthy, I talk about it all the time, and then when I'm in the shit, I do like what I tell people not to do. But at the same time, I talk about it way more than I did like 8 years ago when I wouldn't have said shit. I would have just got drunk and high. So, anyway, that's my story. Dylan, would you like to share?
Yeah, Todd, your feelings are resonating with me. And the reason is, as Shayne can attest to this, I went through some struggles myself right after Christmas in the month of January. And, it was one of those moments where I wasn't suicidal in that moment, but I realized that I needed to sit in the shit. And I realized in that moment that it was okay to feel what I was feeling. It was okay to feel like I was a lost cause, even though I wasn't, Right. So I think in your position, it's very much the same. It's like, okay, I recognize that I have all these feelings, and I have these feelings quite often, but there's a big difference between having a thought and then having an action plan or a game plan of how you're going to execute said thought. That's a whole different grasp. A lot of people will never understand. I had suicidal thoughts from 2012 probably till 2016. It wasn't until 2016 where things got so bad that I actually attempted it. I tried to attempted suicide 3 times in the span of, I think it was a year and like 2 months, so 14 months. that's when I realized like I needed to change my life. Like I had gotten my diagnosis, things weren't changing. I was in toxic relationships. That's friendships and relationships. I was broke as shit. I was spending money like crazy. I was still in this vicious cycle of what I call my past life. And for me, actually, there's one gentleman that I've never met in my life. And I was listening to his podcast. I don't know if you've ever heard of Lewis Howes, but he has a podcast, and he's like one of those Instagram entrepreneur type of guys. But he has a book, and I believe it's like Taking Off the Mask or something about masculinity, unmasking masculinity. And I read that book, and I thought to myself, this is a very powerful book, because me and him had a very similar story. I don't think I've ever said this publicly too. So you have a first for Shayne and myself, but
the ratings are going to be great.
I talked to guys in peer about it, because I was sexually assaulted as a child by another child for well over 3 years of my life. And it was, you don't realize as you're growing up the effects it has on you. In fact, it wasn't until my late 20s where I was like, oh, this is the reason why I can't go into a swimming pool. Like these are the reasons why I have these negative thoughts about going into the restroom at the gas station with other men. It had nothing to do with who I was as a person. It had nothing to do with the slight bullying that I had as a kid. No, it had everything to do with this. And so when I read this book, he had a very similar story. And so I thought to myself, well, if this guy is successful and he still struggles with his shit, why can't I do the same? I don't have to be on his level when it comes to success, but why can't I have a happy, fulfilling life if this guy can? And then for me, it was honestly just a switch in my mindset, as in like, I need to stop beating myself up because I have these negative thoughts, to saying, I'm going to live with these negative thoughts probably the rest of my life. And for me, now it's trial and error to figure out what's going to be best for I call it my mental health management. What's going to be best. So like a daily routine for me is I wake up, and the first thing I do is I drink water. That's the first thing I do. I used to get up and drink coffee. Now I have 2 cups of water before I even think of coffee. Another thing is I journal every day. I exercise 1 to 2 times per day. I have to, because I'll just go crazy. And here's the thing about that is, if I don't exercise that 1 or 2 times every single day, I won't go to the gym at all.
Right.
Like for 4 or 5 weeks straight. So it's like, if I miss a day, it's detrimental to my mental health. But it became trial and error. So from 2017 till now, it's still trial and error, because there's going to be things that work for a while and then stop working. Right. So, it's basically my story, is like, it was trial and error, and it was just a mindset shift.
Right. Yeah. It's still trial and error, man. Like you said, you try one thing for a long time and then it stops working. That's what marijuana did for me. It stopped working. Damn it. No matter how hard I tried.
It was the same for me, man. I've smoked weed, I think, once this year. I used to smoke it every night before I went to sleep. I had, to be honest with you, it just got to a point where it stopped working for me in that manner. And then all of a sudden one day I realized it had been like 4 weeks since I used it. And I was like, well, if it's been 4 weeks and I didn't even notice, I honestly don't need it at this point in my life. Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for sharing those stories, guys. I'm honored that you're coming public with some of this stuff with me.
You're the first person to ask us to be on a podcast. So
that's what I told him.
Yeah. Maybe if you were on a podcast earlier, you'd come out public earlier. Do you guys have merchandise?
Yeah, absolutely we do. If I can remember our account, www.myshopify.interman. Is that right, Dylan?
It's the Interman Project.myshopify.
Way off.
Yeah, it's
close.
It's all right. I'll send you the link here. Yeah, you can buy merch, or you can just go to our Facebook and just push buy now, and it'll take you right there. So
awesome. And you're on Facebook and Instagram?
Yeah, we have a public forum. That's so basically Mel basically is our main handler of that account, and she puts out motivating posts. So when you see those, that's mostly Melissa, a little bit of Dylan. I don't touch it because I just mess it up every time I do. So I stay away from it as much as I can. But yeah, you can if you reach out to us on our public forum. Or then send us a message, and we can, for the men, we can send you a private link, and we'll accept you into our private forum.
Right on. Is there anything I missed that you guys want to add?
Yeah, I'll tell the listeners where to go. It's www.facebook.com/The Interman Project. Twitter and Instagram is @IntermanYXH. Our Gmail is intermanyxh@gmail.com. And yeah, I personally only do the Instagram. My wife does mostly all of our social media. Shayne is the handler when it comes to our messengers. So if you get a reply back from our public page, it's from Shayne. I do most of the podcast back end work. So I produce and edit and get the guests in line for the podcast. So yeah, it's been, it's been a fascinating journey so far, and I'm excited to, see how far the Interman Project expands to. And I appreciate you having us on the show, Todd.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I think it's awesome what you guys are doing, and you have, all my respect, and keep up the good work. I mean, you started off with an idea to now you got a whole damn team just working on your social media stuff. So
I want to give a huge shout out to our team in Medicine Hat, Edmonton, and the couple of gentlemen in Calgary. In total now there's probably 20 of us making this thing go. And, we have a 24/7 support chat that men can reach out to, all men volunteering. I think there's 14 in total. Our board of directors as a nonprofit, our team captains in Edmonton, Calgary, Grand Prairie, they've all been fascinated, absolutely fantastic, I should say, and putting this thing together. So I appreciate everyone who's been a part of the Interman Project so far.
Thanks again, guys. It's really amazing all the stuff you're doing. And, obviously, like I said in the interview, Medicine Hat in Alberta is obviously aching for this kind of services and this kind of program. So good on you. And, keep up the good work. Next week, I'm talking to a lovely young lady about her mental health issues. Her name is Angela Singer. She is in recovery from not only addictions, also sexual assault survivor. She's in recovery also for borderline personality disorder and eating disorders. So she's got a full story and an interesting story, and I really look forward to that one, and I hope you tune into that one because it's a great story. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that podcast. If you did, even if you didn't, well, no, if you didn't, never mind. But if you did, please, you've been listening for an hour now. Please, it literally takes 20 to 30 seconds. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, just give it a quick rate and a quick review, and it'll mean so much to me. Apple has some kind of algorithm, and the more rates and reviews you have, then the more other people can listen to the podcast. And I think that's great because I think it's a really important podcast. So, please do me that favor. Thank you. This episode has been sponsored by Regina Plumbing and Heating. Call 306-585-2000 for all your plumbing, heating, and cooling needs. If you are having a mental health crisis, please call the Canadian crisis number at 1-833-456-4566. In Saskatchewan, the mobile crisis team in Prince Albert is 306-764-1011. In Regina, it's 306-525-5333, and in Saskatoon, it's 306-933-6200. Don't forget to check out my children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Sometimes Daddy Cries is told through the eyes of a boy whose father suffers from depression. He sees his dad get sad, rest, and even go to the hospital, all while comparing his father's depression to a physical ailment. Available on Amazon.ca. I'll see you next time. This is Todd Redebaum saying, make your beds and take your meds. Bye.